What is up, nerds and virgins? Today we're going over my build for Saruman the White Hand, and boy, let me tell you, this thing is a banger. I built this around 2 years ago. I was really high. It took me about 10 minutes, but the end results speak for themselves. I've never dropped a game, and I've probably played close to 2,000, 2,500 games with this thing, so you can imagine how good it is. Without further ado, let's get into it. Saruman is a 4-cost commander in the Grixis colors. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, amass Orcs X, where X is that spell's mana value. So, essentially, we are going to get out Saruman, cast a bunch of non-creature spells, making a mammoth Orc army, and then we're going to drop that Orc army on our opponent's head for a bunch of damage and win the game. Super simple. I'll give you an overview of the structure. 10 creatures. And I know you're thinking, oh, I love playing creatures. Listen, if you are playing more than 10 creatures, I mean, you could probably play like 11, but if you're playing more than like 13 creatures, then you're just playing the commander wrong. You need non-creature spells, so. Also notice that all these are lower than 4 except Grima, and that is strategic because you really want to get these out before you put out Saruman to start building the engine a little bit. So 10 creatures, you could probably get away with 8 creatures really. It might even run better. 18 sorceries, 20 instances, and 8 artifacts, 5 mana rocks. You know, some shit. Enchantments, 38 lands. I think that's the perfect number for this deck. And then I have a sideboard here. These are all sideboard. These are cards that I tried out and they didn't work, or that I will try. But you don't need to worry about those. So instead of going over like all of these individually, I've just broken down the core of the deck, which I have here in the must-have section. There are 30 cards that you must have in order to optimize this deck. So I'm just going to go over those, and then that should give you a good idea of just how insane this thing can actually be. Starting with advice from the Fae. Notice we have this hybrid mana up here. So this sorcery CMC is always 6, but we'll be casting it for 3. And you'll be doing that like 80% of the time. Sometimes you'll pay 4 for it, but most of the time it's going to be 3, and then it's just a little card draw thing. It's a fine card, but we're really interested in this hybrid mana. Same thing with this card. It's a okay tutor. But we are really looking at this hybrid mana. There's only 3 of these hybrid mana cards in our colors in the format, so we're playing all 3 of them. They're really good. Flame Javelin is the 3rd one. Blasphemous Act. Obviously, we get an insane cost reduction, so we can play this for a single red mana, and when we cast it, its CMC is 9, so we'll generate 9 counters for the Orc army. And you really want the Orc army to be at 5 power toughness when you cast this, because Blasphemous Act is going to do 13 damage to everything, but it'll get 9 counters, making it a 14/14. So it'll live the Blasphemous Act, and then it'll wipe everything else, and you'll be left with your 14/14 Orc army. Blazing Shoal. You may remove a red card with converted mana cost X in your hand from the game rather than pay Blazing Shoal's mana cost. Target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn. So optimally, we'd be discarding something like Volcanic Salvo for 12. So X would be 12, and the CMC of this card upon cast would be 14. So we get 14 counters when we cast it for the Orc army, and then we get an additional 12 power. So that's 26 power just off of 2 mana. And then after we do that, we can just simply fling it at a guy. Incredible card. Chandra's Ignition is just a fling type deal, but a little better. Really good in a 4-man game because you can hit every player. Cloud of Dominus is a little bit of protection in lieu of something like Swiftfoot Boots or Lightning Greaves. It gives Saruman +2/+2 Shroud and Haste. So pretty good. This thing kind of looks like a shrimp. Kind of makes me a little hungry, man. I wonder, put some freaking Creole seasoning on that thing, fry it up. All right, Curse of the Swine is an insane removal spell. I like having these X cost sorceries and instances because we can always max out what X is, and then we don't have to worry about unspent mana. So we can always max out the CMC of the card and therefore max out the number of counters going to our orc army. Embercleave needs no introduction, busted ass card, wins the game a lot of the time, and you get the cost reduction if you're swinging with some creatures, which is good. Essence Harvest is just a better fling. You want to have your orc army pretty big before you cast this, and then target player loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Pretty self-explanatory. Fall of Care Andros. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, amass Orcs X, where X is that excess damage. So if we play something like Blasphemous Act, we hit a crazy combo. We can make like 100 orc army real quick. Same thing goes for like Volcanic Salvo and a lot of these other deal damage cards, which I have a lot of in the deck. Let me find some like this and that. Hell to Pay, things like that. Fate Transfer. This is a nice little combat trick or protection spell for our orc army. So if someone's targeting the orc army, we can just, in response, we can move all the counters from it onto Saruman or another creature we control. And if there's a creature not being blocked, we can simply move all the counters from the orc army to that creature before damage is dealt and easily win the game. Flame Javelin is another hybrid mana. It deals 4 damage to target creature or player. It's really good. Flame of Anor. If you control a wizard, you get 2 of these, which we will have because our commander is a wizard, as well as a couple other creatures in the deck. So we're always going to be able to play 2, and it's good card draw, good removal for 3 mana, insane equity. Busted card. Fling, yeah, it's a game winner. Once you get your army to a certain power, just throw it at a guy. It's kind of the basis to how this whole deck works. Harmonic Prodigy is really good. Just for 2 mana, we can 2x Saruman's ability, and therefore 2x our counters on our orc army whenever we play a non-creature spell. Also, the other creatures are mostly shamans and wizards, so they will get double their abilities as well. Liva on the Cultist. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is that spell's mana value. So again, optimally, we're playing something pretty high value, like Volcanic Salvo or one of these hybrid mana cards, and then we get +X. So let's say we play Beseech the Queen, we get 6 power. If we have Prodigy out or Varen, then we get +12, and then we're ready to fling. We're ready to cleave. We can do Ignition, Harvest, Battle Rage, and things like that, and win the game. Mnemonic Deluge. Exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard. Copy that card 3 times. You may cast the copies without paying their mana cost. So yeah, this is just a straight up win the game situation. If we get to 9 mana, we're going to be casting something from our graveyard. Probably either something with a very high CMC or one of our win con cards, which I just mentioned, and win the game. Not of This World is a perfect card for this deck. Let me explain. Counter target spell or ability that targets a permanent you control. Not of this role costs 7 less to cast if it targets a spell or ability that targets a creature you control with power 7 or greater. So this is really good protection for the Orc army, which a lot of people will go after in lieu of Saruman, because at the end of the day, the Orc army is going to be the biggest threat on the board, and people love removing it. So we can essentially, if our Orc army has 7 counters on it, which it will most of the time, then we can cast this for 0, and we can counter whatever spell's coming at it, and we get an additional 7 counters for the Orc army. Insanely busted. Orcish Siege Master. Since we can't really copy the army token, as the counters don't get copied, this is the next best thing. We're going to get the same power on our turn, and it's basically like having an army copy with, and then that gives our other orcs and goblins trample. Another must-have card. Retribution of Ancients, 1 black mana. It's an enchantment. We can spend 1 black mana and remove X+1/+1 counters from among creatures you control. Target creature gets -X until end of turn. This is just a good way to control the board state. If your opponent is putting out like a bunch of 2/2 things that are trying to build an engine, you can just remove a couple counters and deal with any kind of threat that's coming in. Really good card. Ringsight is just a tutor, and really why this is in here, I don't like playing a lot of tutors, but a lot of times you will need to find an answer for some bullshit that's going wrong, and with Ringsight you can do that and send it right to your hand. So it's really good, and it's only 40 cents, which is a really good value. Slip Through Space just makes our Orc army unblockable, little game winner, and you get to draw a card, which is really good. There's also another card that's exactly like this with a different name, which I might put in eventually. Snap. Great little spot removal, sends a creature back to its owner's hand, and you can untap 2 lands. So it pays for itself, which frees up mana for other non-creature spells in the same turn. Soulsfire is just a better flank. You don't have to sacrifice your Orc army. Summons of Saruman. X, blue, red. Amass Orcs X. Mill X cards. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana value X or less from among them without paying its mana cost. So say you pay 6 for this. X equals 4. You get 6 counters upon cast, and then you get 4 more from the Amass Orcs X. So that's already 10 counters. Then you mill 4. And then hopefully you'll be milling a 4-cost instant or sorcery that you can cast for free. So you cast that, and you get 4 more counters. So you're at 14 counters. This goes to the graveyard. And then you can cast it again with a flashback and just generate a bunch more counters on a later turn. It's an insane card. It's curtailed for the commander, so you have to play it. Surrounded by Orcs is 4, and then you amass Orcs 3, so that's already 7 counters going to the Orc army. And then you can get some stuff for the graveyard, which you can, there's a lot of cards in this deck that will be playing spells from the graveyard. So it enables that little sub-theme. Temur Battle Rage is a 2-cost instant. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. That creature also gains trample until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So really you just need your Orc army at 2 for this spell to be maxed out, because when you cast it, it gets another 2, so it'll be 4 power, and then it'll resolve, so you get double strike and trample. So you could be swinging with 8 and trample. But obviously if you play this when your Orc army is massive, the double strike and trample a lot of times will just win the game. Veyrin is just another harmonic prodigy. You 2x Saruman's ability 2x your counters for every non-creature spell you play. Vial Smasher the Fierce. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, choose an opponent at random. A Vial Smasher deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to that player or planeswalker that player controls. So this is kind of a burn route for this deck, and since we're playing all these high cost spells, we can generate some damage off of that if he's on the battlefield, winning the game even faster. Volcanic Salvo. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is total power of creatures you control. So a lot of times you'll be playing this for just the 2 red, and then it deals 6 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalker. So you're getting rid of 2 creatures that the opponent controls a lot of the time, and you're getting insane value from the 12 CMC. And that about wraps up the core, and the core of the deck costs around $70. So as long as you have that, the rest is just whatever you want to put. Obviously, you're going to need your mana rocks and some other removal spells. But as long as you have the core, this deck is going to absolutely destroy people. And you can ignore the Orcish Bowmasters and the Mana Drain. I just drew those in packs, so it's like of course I'm going to put them in here. But they're not really necessary to the function of the deck. So if you take those out, then this number becomes 130. And you can really get below $100 if you want to cut out like Veyrin or Embercleave and stuff like that. That's like $10. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up the build. I will have the link to the deck in the description if you want to check it out. You can build this for yourself. You can make your own tweaks. You want to keep the core the same, obviously, as I mentioned. And you can look like a genius when you are absolutely destroying your friends' $400 decks with this sub $100 build. And that does it for this Commander deck. Thanks for watching and have a good night. I'm Henry Cavill. I'm gay.